We may be seeing the biggest fixture change in the last 20 years coming as soon as 2025. The idea of a wildcard round, ideally played during the pre-finals bye, has been floated for a while. If you believe SEN and Fox Footy game caller Dwayne Russell, then the change is guaranteed. "We are getting a wildcard round next year," Russell said on SEN. "You can take that to the bank. We're getting a wildcard round next year, I reckon. I'm just hearing it from too many people for it not to be true." He also mentioned the special round would have a different name besides wildcard. CEO Andrew Dillon was asked about the possibility and said this.
The wildcard is something that got probably a bit more support than it has had previously, but there's a lot of consultation that we'll have to go through with our clubs, our players and our commission. But from small ideas come big things, and we've had, Gather Round was a thought bubble at one stage, and we've seen how successful that's been.
He's normally conservative with what he says, but it just feels like he hinted that the round will be in the competition sooner rather than later. It's just one possible change for 2025, while other important elements of the draft and trading system have been permanently shifted. The poll on the channel at the time of making this clearly shows most of you guys don't want the introduction of the round. There are two ways of looking at it. A more cynical viewpoint is this is just a money grab, and sure it is. Even more so when Dillon acknowledged that the two games that would be played between 7th and 10th and 8th versus 9th could be sold to the city who bids the highest amount of money to host the two games. This is possible, but surely would ruin the small advantage of finishing 7th and 8th and getting to host a home final. It just doesn't make any sense in correlation with the rest of the final series format. You can also fairly point out, what if 9th and 10th are just bad teams? Not every season is like this one, where 12 teams halfway through the year are legitimate top 8 contenders and good teams. Do we really want the chance that a team or two with losing records advance to the next stage of the season? However, the flip side has a lot to give for the AFL, and it's hard to ignore it. It does feel like the tradition in the AFL is slowly eroding away, but it might be necessary. Tasmania will come in as the 19th team, and you would think a 20th will follow soon. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have only 8 teams from a 19 or 20 team competition making finals. Too many supporter bases will be left out, but a chance to feature 10 teams gives fans the most important thing: hope. Engagement will then still be high throughout the season, and if we use the ladder right now, 13 teams would be a realistic shot to finish top 10, which is fantastic for the AFL, and it's what they want. I know a lot of you guys don't like the idea, but you can't tell me you wouldn't watch 2 wildcard round finals between the Western Bulldogs and Hawthorn, followed by Essendon and Carlton. Now the matchups might not be to this level every year, but both games would attract huge attendances and TV audiences. There will be little finite details to figure out, such as are these two games actual finals, or are they a separate concept themselves, and therefore stats don't count in the finals record book, but the concept as a whole is pretty simple. It keeps more teams in it until the end of the home and away season, and helps balance out the addition of Tasmania and a possible 20th team. We do seem to be moving away from tradition, and maybe for some, this could be one step too far. But one of the biggest confirmed changes for 2025 is to do with trading draft picks. AFL clubs can now access selections 2 years in advance. For example, next season teams can trade their 2025, 2026 and now 2027 draft picks. It's something clubs like North Melbourne and Richmond have been knocking down the door for. For the Kangaroos, if they believe they have enough young talent right now, then they can gamble by trading these future picks for established players to help move up the ladder. And for Richmond, who are beginning to rebuild their list, this helps them possibly trade out players and spread picks over a 3-year period instead of putting all their draft eggs in one national draft basket. Now it might not have a huge effect for most clubs, but it does unlock the potential for mega trades where we could see more like Jeremy Cameron to Geelong and Jason Horne-Francis to Port Adelaide as a couple of examples. It adds flexibility, which is what the clubs want. Could it extend to trading picks 3 or 4 years down the line? Maybe, but that could create some problems if teams give away their future assets for the present and then get stuck. Now, something that will make Essendon fans happy is the NGA adjustments. This was expected a while back, but the Jamara rule has been abolished. Next generation academy players can be picked up from any selection and are not locked from pick 40 onwards as they have been for the past few drafts. Essendon specifically this year will have access to highly touted small forward prospect Isaac Kako. It makes sense to bring this system back to what it was and means clubs will fully invest in their NGA programs in the future. But there is a bit of a twist for 2025 and beyond. NGA, Club Academy and father-son draftees won't be as cheap anymore. The draft value index, which allocates points to every draft pick as seen here, will be changing. First of all, from picks 54 and onwards, no points will be allocated. So pick 55, for example, will have a DVI of 0 and is essentially useless in matching bids for father-son or academy players. This, according to the AFL, will take off 10,000 points from the DVI. Next up, the 20% discount on match bids will now only be 10%, obviously meaning bids overall will be 10% more expensive. The two changes are an attempt to make it more costly to get highly rated father-son and academy players, while also stopping clubs from stockpiling later draft picks, which are then traded for high picks by clubs who need lots of points to match bids. It's a tactic that Richmond is clearly trying to do in 2024 with their stockpile of selections beyond pick 40. It's an improvement in trying to make the draft a little more fair, but for guys like Nick Dacos, Jamara Ugle-Hagan, Sam Darcy and Will Ashcroft, the price, even with these changes, still seems cheap. Rookie listed players can also be extended for an extra season, and the AFL will continue to go over those DVI point changes and adjust them if they feel like it's necessary. But the wildcard round is the big one. The 8-team final system has been a staple since 2000 and has worked really well. This, if it does come in, will be a small extension of the final system in a competition that has expanded with Gold Coast, GWS and now Tasmania. Dylan said the AFL clubs themselves are warming to the concept, and it seems like the next step is to get the fans on board.